Welcome to our program on Cardiac Radio.
Dear Cardiac Radio listeners, good morning. This is Dr. Shane Martin, and it's my pleasure and honor to host today's show at Cardiac Radio. And today, we have two outstanding guests, Dr. Mehl Madrona and Barbara Mainguy. And we'll be talking with them about their latest book that is entitled Remapping Your Mind, the Neuroscience of Self-Transformation Through Story. If you'd like to know more about our guests, you can visit Dr. Lewis' webpage. That is www.mehl.madrona.com. Dear listeners, it's my pleasure to be talking about this book with them today, as we are in January and we are starting our new year. And many of us have made promises and in hope to improve our lives, and we made New Year's resolutions. So I hope to facilitate a conversation with them so that we may learn different techniques they use in their practices that have improved their patients' health conditions. I also hope to speak with them about how the brain processes information in the form of stories and how we can harness the power of stories to improve our lives. Now, Dr. Mehl Madrona is a physician. He's graduated from Stanford University. He's trained in family medicine, psychiatry, and clinical psychologist. He's the author of 100-plus published papers, 8 published books, including Coyote Medicine, Coyote Healing, and Coyote Wisdom. He has also written Narrative Medicine, Healing the Mind Through the Power of a Story, The Promise of Narrative Psychiatrist, and his most recent book with Miss Barbara Mainguy is called Remapping Your Mind, the Neuroscience of Self-Transformation Through Story. Barbara Mainguy is a psychotherapist and education director for the Coyote Institute for the Studies for Change and Transformation. Dear listener, before we connect with our guest today, I would like to let us to hear an inspiring message from Emmanuel entitled The Kingdom of God is at Hand.
The kingdom of God is at hand. Many times said the Lord, the kingdom of God is at hand. Until today, thousands of people have waited for its arrival through spectacular exterior events. Many expected through unspeakable cataclysms and feed their imagination with ghostly scenes incompatible with the divine mercy which presides our destinies. Thunders rumble in the firmament. Tsunamis and earthquakes. Mutinous crowds causing ruin. Flammable fluids in the atmosphere, turning it into devouring fire. Withering bombs destroying entire nations. Those people usually count on the uncanny and the fantastic so that they can feel they are at the gateway of the great change. There is no doubt that such catastrophic events may take place at any moment in people's experience in the field of nature. However, far from meaning the kingdom of God, they only reveal the need for a new battle, with a rougher work to be done by those who take part in the evolutional boards of humanity. The kingdom of God is at hand, yes it is, but before all else, in our capacity to build it inside us through the heaven that we can offer to our neighbor's soul. Let's attend to the accomplishments of the duties life brings to us, helping as much as we can for the victory of the good by following the love the Lord bequeathed to us, and we will reach, as early as possible, the celestial atmosphere for us and for others. That's why Jesus likewise was adamant and fair when stated, "When they say to you that the kingdom of God is here or there, do not believe them, because, in truth, the kingdom of God is within you." Emmanuel. Psychography, Chico Xavier. Free translation.
Hi, dear listeners, welcome back. If you just joined us this morning, we're speaking with Dr. Mehl Madrona and Barbara Mainguy about their latest book, Remapping Your Mind, The Neuroscience of Self-Transformation. I'm Shane Martin, and I'm hosting today's show. Now, we would like to connect and speak with them. Dr. Mehl Madrona, are you there? Hello? Dr. Mehl Madrona, I think that I'm not hearing you. That's okay, dear listeners. We are live. Hello?
Yeah, maybe you guys muted me. Hello?
Hello? Good morning. Is this Barbara? Hello. Well, Dr. Mehl Madrona?
Hello? Hello, we heard
Barbara?
the word mute.
I can hear you. So can the listeners,
Okay.
I believe. Good morning. Welcome to Cardiac Radio.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much for speaking with us. So before we go on deep into the book, would you guys explain to all our listeners what are your current activities in Maine?
Well, I teach family medicine with the University of New England College of Osteopathic Medicine. So I work with family medicine residency here in Bangor, Maine. And I also work with Acadia Hospital. And then we have a separate not-for-profit institute called Coyote Institute in Orono, Maine, where we study and provide education about change and transformation.
Is Barbara, are you also part of the practice?
I'm a psychotherapist, and I have my own private practice, and then we're actually just about to start doing some work together. Again, we're getting it set up to do some work with people, so we're going to be doing this kind of work with folks. In a couple of months, we'll be getting back into our private practice.
That is wonderful. Would you guys explain to our listeners, I think that would be for Dr. Mehl Madrona, what is narrative medicine?
Well, narrative medicine has been defined as medicine practiced with what's called narrative competency, which means that as a physician, you appreciate the importance of the patient's story, understanding their illness, and in their healing or their recovery, and that you understand that there's that whatever we do as human beings, it's rooted in a template that takes the form of a story. That's how our brains function. Really, the definition that most of us are using.
Let me ask you something that I got from watching some of your lectures, Dr. Madrona. You mentioned a couple of things. The first one is what you call the world of spirits, and that also comes back to the reader during the book about some of the rituals that you participate and bring some of the patients to them. Would you explain what this world of spirits is to you?
Sure. And I should mention that not everyone who does narrative medicine believes in the world of spirit, but for a number of us, we accept that there is a non-physical world, a non-physical reality, and that there are non-physical beings of energy, and that we interact with them. I think that's probably for myself, as a Native American, this is, the essence of our spirituality. And I think it probably is also present in Christianity, Islam, and other religions, this notion of there being a spiritual dimension that's in some way apart from but connected to this physical reality.
That is wonderful. And for the two of you, how did the idea of this specific book come about?
Well, I think from our experiences working with people and being present while they went through this journey and changed, we realized that, and people asking the kinds of questions they asked, we realized that it would be really useful to provide a book that not only looked at the neuroscience underpinnings of the idea of story and really helped people understand how valuable it is as a route to being able to change and adapt and grow, but also that to really give good descriptions of the kinds of work that we do with people and to continue the writing that Lewis has done with providing stories to give really clear examples of what kinds of things we're talking about, because we're really we're really talking about playing people's stories. It's a form of grown-up mental play with the world around you, and we just thought that it would be a good idea to really demonstrate what it is that we're doing and aim towards some clinicians who might be interested in doing some of this work.
And that is wonderful. How does that differ from many of the traditional practices? I got an impression from your book that a lot of the patients come to you, Dr. Madrona, and to you, Barbara, for different illnesses and conditions, mostly as I would say, a last resort, as in they first look for traditional medicine. They go to their physicians and they bounce back from specialist to specialist, and they don't find, a cure or satisfactory outcome. And then they look to your practice. Is that a true statement, that your view is different from the traditional, and most people come to you after they've tried something that we consider traditional?
I think we would probably prefer to use the word conventional, because we think of tradition as something that's been around for 500 years or more.
Okay.
And it's unfortunate that many people do come to us as a last resort, and it's not always possible to turn things around at that point. Though I think that healing is always possible, no matter what your state of body. But we live in a culture where we're all trained to go to conventional medicine and take the pills, and we're not really taught to simultaneously look at our lives and our psychosocial environments and our relationships with other people and nature and food and ask whether there are imbalances in those areas that could be addressed to help us to get well. And also, it's hard to change one's lifestyle without help from your friends. It's much easier to take a pill or to go have surgery because it doesn't require an effort on your part. And so, we live in a time when people like things to be easy and quick, whereas reflecting upon one's relationships,
trying new things,
trying out new ways of relating to the world or to other people, changing your diet, just starting to walk every day or exercise, that's hard for people.
And starting to, really understand that our stories are not written in stone. That there's that changing the way that we think about things and trying new ways of thinking as well as new behaviors, trying new mental journeys about our lives is tremendously powerful. But again, it takes time. It takes time to create new pathways in the mind and to create new relationships and new little firing groups of neurons that might work together.
And is that related to the concept you bring in the book about the need for others in our lives? So can we actually go to see someone and then take the pill or not, or make different changes in our lifestyles, and then when we put that person back to where they came from, they wouldn't necessarily get any better? Is that what you mean by the need for others and having an audience that observes us and we observing them observe us?
We need community to maintain a changed lifestyle. We need other people, and we need people to applaud what it is we're doing or trying to do. We need people to do it with us. And if we're with people who are doing the opposite of what we're trying to do, it gets really difficult. Unfortunately, at the hospital, we see a lot of people who are addicted to heroin, oxycodone, things like that. And it's really hard for them to be different, to not take those substances if all their friends are taking those substances. And so it's easy to not take them if you're in the hospital and nobody's bringing them to you. But as soon as you leave the hospital and you go back to that environment which is rich with these substances, then people fall back into using them. And of course they do relieve the pain of social isolation, which many people feel. So, to step out of that, one has to have a different community, a community that doesn't include opiates or heroin or things like that.
And how easy it is for your patients that you guys seeing, either together or separately, to make those changes so that they go back to a more positive environment, a more, an environment that will promote their healing?
I think it's a heroic journey. I think that people need to be applauded for making even small changes, because it's so easy for us to stick to the rut we know and just keep spinning our tires in the mud and digging our deeper and deeper into a hole. So when someone comes along and says, "Hey, look, I got this plank, this wooden plank. Let's put it down under your tire. Maybe we'll get you out." it's the easiest thing is to say, no, I'll just keep doing what I'm doing. I don't need any help. So, but then you never get out of the hole. So I think we have to applaud people for every little effort they make to changing the way that they're living. And we talk about people as being characters in a story. And the story is about the lifestyle. The story is, this is how people live. This is the way people relate to the world. And there's other characters in these stories. They could be parents, or they can be friends, or brothers, or sisters, and they're all living in the same way, with the same plot for how to solve problems. You can also talk about strategy as a plot. And so to develop a new strategy or to develop a new plot, you need support. You need other people to say, hey, I'm your helper. Let's work together to take this in a different direction. Instead of going on the low road all the time, let's try the high road. Or the coastal road. Any different road is maybe better than the one you're on that we know doesn't go anywhere.
Do you would you explain to the listeners? I'm trying to get into the concept of discerning traits from stories. So on page 134, if you allow me to quote from it, you guys write, we're saying that people are fundamentally fine. Suffering arises from the stories that flow through people, that people faithfully reproduce, and that are enacted by people. People are not the cause of suffering. Stories are the cause of suffering. Changing the story changes the suffering, unquote. How is that different from, how is this view different from the current psychology of personality traits, the flaws and difficulties that people have inherited in them?
Well, we wouldn't say that you've inherited the stories. We would say that you've absorbed them through participation in a family and a community and a culture. And we would say that who you are is the summation and integration of all the stories that you've absorbed. And so to change, you just need to hear better stories and more of them, and that will shift you. That will shift you in the direction of the stories that you're hearing. The conventional psychological model of traits them as enduring and very difficult to change. And so we're poking at that story about traits and saying, well, we think they're perhaps difficult to change because people are in a rut with the same old story. But if you're surrounded by a new story, you can move relatively quickly into a new way of coping with the world. So take, for example, someone who's chronically depressed. Maybe they've learned as a way of dealing with the world to collapse inward in response to stress or adversity and to give up. That notion of learned helplessness, that they've learned that nothing they do will matter anyway, so why bother? Just collapse in a heap and be miserable. So if that's been what you've been surrounded by for years and what you've done for years, and it probably has some comfort in that you don't bang your head against the wall. You're not doing things that ultimately fail, which maybe is worse. Then that's what you do. And if somebody comes along and says, I've got a different story about this situation. Maybe we could try it my way. You might say, no way, you're crazy. This is how the world is. But if enough people come along and say, well, there's a bunch of us who think differently, and we'd like to show you how we think, and share our stories with you. And maybe you'd like to hang out with us a bit and try on our stories, and maybe we could help you out here to try a different strategy for living in the world. And what happens? Well, you might change.
And what are some of the techniques you both used on your patients that can allow people to find those stories, the characters embedded in them, and how they can play out different scenarios so that may help them heal for whatever condition they may have?
Well, I wouldn't use the word on. I would probably use the word with. Because what we do is collaborative. I don't really think of it as treat, in quotes. I think of it as collaboration. That we're exploring together how things work. And so one way to begin is when we hear somebody make a statement of fact, this is how it is. We say, well, how did you learn that this is how it is? When did you first discover that this is how things work? When did you first discover that no matter what you do, it'll turn out poorly? When did you first discover that nothing you ever do turns out well? And did anyone tell you that? Did anyone in your past remind you of that? And who are these people who told you this? And so we begin to get at the storytellers from our past, the people who told us the story that things would never change, things would never get better, it'll always be miserable, and that we're helpless to do anything about it. And so as we begin to develop a cast of storytellers and the stories they told, then we might pose the question, well, is this true for everyone? Well, no, obviously it's not. So let's go find someone for whom that's not true and find out what stories they grew up with, and how are those stories different from your stories. And maybe we'll try a little experiment of poking at the story, of trying something and getting feedback about what happens. So if you think that everything you do turns out poorly, maybe we'll send you to my son for a glass blowing lesson, and you can make a beautiful piece of jewelry that turns out well. And isn't that surprising that you can do something interesting, that's pretty, that turned out well? So that's called a counter-narrative in the terminology. It's a story that opposes the dominant story. It's a story that says, hey, look, I did something and it turned out well. It's also, when you do that, it's called behavioral activation. So experimenting on the world to see if it responds differently, if you do something differently, is a really important part of what we do. And we try and pick safe, small experiments, and ones that we know are likely to succeed. So we also get at this through, sometimes we ask people about the movies that they grew up with, the ones that really impressed them when they were, say, teenagers. And where that's been particularly helpful is when people are having trouble finding romantic partners who work. Because a lot of times we learn how to pick a romantic partner from the movies that we grew up with as teenagers, and sometimes they're great movies, but they don't work so well. Like an example would be the movie How to Marry a Millionaire. It's a great movie, but it's not a very practical solution to the problem of romance, or Pride and Prejudice. It's a great movie, and it's a wonderful literary device that the heroine can transform the profligate lord into a good guy. But in general, when you go around the world trying to find, imperfect men and turn them perfect. It doesn't work so well. Maybe not the best approach, to long-term happiness. So we play with the stories, that shaped you, and some of them are cultural stories. Some of them are spiritual stories or religious stories. People have stories about what is a good person. And it could be stories that they read in the Bible, or it could be Buddhist stories, or it could be stories their grandfather told them. So, and maybe we know what the goal is, but we don't have a clue how to get there. We don't have a strategy. We don't have a plot. We've got an ending. We've got an outcome.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have a series of small steps to get us there. So part of building narrative competence is to learn how to make a story that moves in small steps and gets us to the desired outcome. And it's a story also that...
Go ahead.
I was going to say it's a story that teaches us that we can come up against obstacles and that we can overcome them. Either through our own efforts or through the help of friends or allies or through creative means, we can find ways to be thwarted in our seeking of the goal and to regroup and to come up with another approach. And the classic example of that, of course, is the Star Wars movies, where they're thwarted, where Luke Skywalker, of course, is thwarted on several occasions. And he keeps going back to the drawing board with Yoda and others and coming up with new solutions for how to destroy the Death Star or how to overcome the Empire. And these are marvelous metaphors for resilience. Because Luke Skywalker never gives up. He's always plodding along, coming up with the next strategy for how to reach the goal. And these are the kinds of heroic stories that we need. Disney is excellent at these kinds of heroic stories. So often in Disney, it's not as much a collective effort as it is an individual achievement, because Disney's American. But it's still the idea of perseverance and overcoming obstacles and hanging in there and tolerating the dark night of the soul, uncertainty, and prevailing, getting to the goal. There's, it's the plot of so many stories, and we in one of my books I wrote about this as there's a famous Christian analogy in England. I'm blocking on the name right now, but it's something like Bunyan, but it's not Paul Bunyan. But it's about this sort of
Pilgrim's Progress.
Pilgrim's Progress, yeah. The whole story of Pilgrim's Progress is this very narrative, from a Christian perspective of being heroic and prevailing against all odds and adversity. So that's survival. That's resilience. That's how we get to where we need to go, whether it's finding the buried treasure to getting the girl, to winning the Olympics, to just winning the local neighborhood basketball game. That's how we do it, is to have these stories and to fall back on them, to enact them. And unfortunately, many people these days lack those kind of stories. They grow up in poverty, in adversity, and things don't work in general. Things don't turn out well. And they're not encouraged because they don't live in that environment, psychological environment. And so they have a story that says, well, nothing ever turns out well, so why bother to do anything? well, that doesn't get you anywhere. Sometimes it gets you diagnosed with things like depression or anxiety, because if you, I think anxiety arises when we have a goal and we see that we're nowhere near it. And in fact, we're getting further and further from achieving our goal, and so our error detecting system is sort of blaring like a klaxon, saying, alert, 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 you're getting further and further from your goal, alert, alert, do something different. And if we don't have a clue what to do different, it's really grating. It's really unsettling. And there's a theory of depression that it begins with anxiety, and depression takes over when you finally give up on the goal. You finally say, well, this sucks. I'm never going to get the goal. I'm getting further and further from the goal.
Hello. Hello. Hi, Cardiac Radio listeners. We are truly on an online live show. We just got briefly disconnected, but I will continue our conversation with Dr. Madrona and Barbara Mainguy. Are you guys still there?
We will return to our program after these messages.
Hey, kids!
Did you know that Cardiac Radio is now for you?
We, Mark,
and Carol,
are going to tell you the most beautiful, exciting, fun stories ever.
All with messages of love and hope that will make your heart smile.
Tune in to Cardiac Radio Mondays beginning October 5th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time for
Stories from the Heart at Cardiac Radio for Kids.
Of course, if you miss us, you can always find us on demand at cardiacradio.com.
If you like our stories, write to us or send your drawings to cardiacforkids@gmail.com.
We can't wait to see you then.
Bye.
Nourish your soul with Cardiac Radio.
If you missed out on any previous shows, no worries. We have an on-demand section of all previous shows and interviews. Go to our website at www.cardiacradio.com.
Spread the word. Cardiac Radio, to learn more about Spiritism.
Help prevent suicide by reading and sharing these books with others. 2 great books are available to help in this Cardiac Radio campaign to prevent suicide. Suicide, All You Need to Know, by the international Spiritist speaker Richard Simonetti. You can buy your copy at www.roundtablepublishing-uk.com. Also, Memoirs of a Suicide by the medium Yvonne Pereda. Buy your copy today at www.ediceiofamerica.com.
Cardiac Radio, live every Saturday at 11 a.m.
Cardiac Radio now offers more programs during the week and weekends. Every Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, you can follow the beautiful program God at Home with Francisca Kranz and the British Spiritist community. They will brighten your days by doing a God at Home meeting wherever you are in the world, while teaching you how to do the same in your own home with your family and friends. Every Thursday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, you will hear incredibly inspirational Spiritist talks directly broadcasted by Spiritist Network. They will be true educational moments to carry out to immortality. Every Saturday, live interviews, Bridging Health and Spiritism with the host Dr. Vanessa Anceloni. You may ask questions to the interviewed guests by calling 877-769-4705. And every Sunday, tune in the Spiritist Awareness at Kardec Radio. You will hear a series of segments on a diversity of Spiritist topics. Kardec will broadcast the Spiritist Moment with Kirsten DeMello, the reading of the Spiritist book by John DeRosa and Steve Shepard, Spiritism in Your Life with Drs. Marco and Joyce Magalhães, Spiritism and the Gospel with Luis Sergio Marotta, Spiritist Education for Youth and Children with Bernadette Leal, Spiritist Music with James Marotta, Neuroscience and Spiritism with Dr. Vanessa Anceloni, and many more segments coming soon. Enjoy it all and nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
And now we return to our program.
Dear Kardec Radio listeners, this is Shane Martin, and we're speaking today with Dr. Mehl Madrona and Barbara Mainguy about their latest book, Remapping Your Mind, the Neuroscience of Self-Transformation Stories. Barbara, I'd like to ask you about some of the techniques and stories you describe on Chapter 8. From your perspective, how can we use the body to help heal our different problems?
There's a lot of interesting literature about the ways that our bodies retain information. And we find that our bodies are great storytellers. There are some people who refer to metaphor as the language of the body. And there's a growing body of some more scientific research, but there's a lot of people who do body work who really acknowledge that working with the body just contributes an incredible amount to working with the mind. And even if you look at it on a kind of visceral level and talk about, heart, mind, belly, the vagus nerve system, you can see that there's just a lot of things that we want to negotiate as far as approaching them physically as well as mentally, because our mental state is really determined by our physical state and vice versa. So, we can do things like meditation, we can do things like breathing, we can do things that help you to work with your body to keep all your different your different information systems connected, and to be able to help you calm down, to be able to help you reduce anxiety. And those are ways of working that are becoming increasingly popular. I don't know anybody these days who doesn't recommend mindfulness as a way of helping with interoception and getting people to be able to work more easily with themselves. Then we get to the kinds of more artistic ideas, and my training as a creative arts therapist ventures into this realm. We get into the realm of ideas that dance and creative movement and movement where you invite a conversation with your body and move the way that your body wants to move can produce some really powerful insights and shifts. So if I say to somebody, for example, which we do often in a situation, we'll say, imagine a situation with conflict in it. Perhaps sometime you had an argument with somebody, sometime you didn't finish a conversation and unfinished business, and then find out where you feel that conversation in your body, and then allow yourself to move the way you would move if that feeling was in charge. And then we kind of engage in a physical exploration and an embodied exploration of the feeling that we had. And we don't need to put feeling words on it. We don't need to try to recover the language yet. That often comes later. And there's a lot of belief that if you can name a feeling, if you can name something, you can get past it. But there are some people where it's literally unspeakable. The truth of what's happened to them or what they're confused by, they don't have language for it. So if we work with the body in this way, we sometimes then we elicit kind of the data of what's emerging for them in the movement. So perhaps they see colors, perhaps they hear sounds, perhaps they think of something that seems completely unrelated, and we collect all this data. And then later we might see if there's anything that emerges as an experience, as an idea, as a memory, as a picture, as a important piece of data that has great resonance for them, that helps them to be able to understand more clearly what it is they're negotiating. So I think that there's a tremendous value in physical movement, in dancing, and also, one of the more interesting kind of physical and verbal things that's been used a lot these days is improvisation. And in improvisation, you engage in a very physical improvisation with somebody, and it's usually harder when you're moving to censor what's coming out of your mouth. So people can often surprise themselves with insights that they may not allow themselves to have if they're sitting talking, but while they're up and moving around and engaged in kind of play acting or a play, that these insights occur to them, and it's almost too quick for them to turn off that source. So there's some very, those are the kinds of things that we do. We often invite people to act out the stories that are troubling them, because we find that you see a lot. You just get a different perspective. You see a lot. You gain a lot from actually performing these stories with your body and seeing and doing it in a conscious way that allows you to reflect as you go on what's happening.
Do patients, are patients open to those ideas when they first come to see you? Some aren't.
Some are very open to them, and that's why they come to see me. Some of them are very surprising. I have had people where they really, wanted to talk, and I would start very gently by suggesting, why don't we stand up and stretch? Why don't we stretch and kind of take them through a stretching exercise that's also a bit of a body scan. And then I might, suggest that they do a really simple thing, like just find a feeling in their body while they're sitting down. And then it depends where it goes. But I had one wonderful person who came to see me who talked for several weeks, and we developed an interest in his story. And then he came in one day and he said, so, what's this movement stuff you do? And he was really the last person. He was a gentleman who was in construction. He was the last person I would have ever thought would have taken to this. But I told him, and we went into the bigger room, and I just started by taking a ball and throwing it to him and varying how quickly I threw the ball to him. And then we talked while we threw the ball, and he had to catch the ball. And he absolutely found movement to be incredibly productive for him. And he never in his life would have thought of it, and he just wanted to try it, out of a sense of adventure. And I think actually his wife had told him that he should try it because she didn't think that the talking was working as well as she was hoped. It wasn't going as quickly as she wanted it to, so she encouraged him. But he never would have thought it, and in the end it was something that was really the breakthrough he was looking for. He was able to really get a handle on some of the things that had been working in him and start to make some good changes. So I think it's an interesting question. There's a lot of talk. These days in psychology they refer to action methods, and an action method is something like this. And they always say, they talk a lot about how you get the person to do it. And I just say, start by saying, why don't we stand up for a moment and just take them through a little, like a mini seventh inning stretch kind of thing, just a little bit of movement just to see how good it feels to do that. And then we might play with it. I might say something like, why don't you walk like your mother-in-law? Your mother-in-law's voice is very powerful for you. Let's give her a body. Maybe you could walk as your mother-in-law and see how that feels. So we do things like that.
How does the way we treat our bodies or we see our bodies based on many different concepts from our culture affect the way we feel? On your chapter 8, you mentioned how unkind we are to our body. So I wanted you to comment on that for a little bit.
We're terribly unkind. You know, I was having some work done on my piriformis muscle the other day because I managed to get it all frightened and tightened up. And while I was lying on the table, the lovely woman who was massaging it was saying, you know, naughty piriformis, it's all knotted up and it's being bad. And I said, no, I always talk gently, and I say thank you to my piriformis for helping me in so many ways, and I'm sorry that I didn't, you know, wasn't gentle enough or balanced enough in the way I approached it. And if we break a leg, we often say, you know, oh, my stupid leg, or my stupid foot, or my stupid stomach, or my stupid back. You know, we often use language like that, and it's very interesting to stop people using language like that and encourage them to talk to their bodies in a gentle and friendly way. And it's almost an interesting exercise in self-love, and to see if people can just kind of, you know, offer themselves any kind of kind talk. Many people can't. Many people offer themselves only kind of a violent communication. So it's very interesting, but it is a real habit of us to be cross with the part that's not working. And I think it speaks to a greater value that we should all be high-performing all the time, and that something that impedes us in being high-performing is to be criticized and got rid of. So we try to fire our body, but it doesn't work. And I find, you know, I sort of believe in the idea that if you talk to a plant, it grows better. If you talk to your body, it heals better. So I really think if you love your body and give yourself the opportunity to keep it refreshed and feeling good and in balance and to move with it. You know, we work out every morning, and I just think of it as a couple of hours of moving with my body every day and just getting to know it and feeling it and feeling the way my feet touch the floor. So I think that we're a long way off of a sense of being a whole person. And I think it would change things tremendously if we just spoke to ourselves a little more kindly.
I would like to ask you guys to give us a couple of things that we may be able. Of course, not many of us are lucky enough to live close to the kind of practitioners that you guys are, and being able to know someone who is more, that can offer us a different perspective on how to heal. So what are some of the things that we can do that are safe at home that may help us get started on this journey of healing?
I think a kind of journaling is probably a really good way to start. And one could begin, there's many ways to begin, and there's many books on journaling. But one could begin by just asking the question, so what are my goals? What is it that I'm seeking in my life? What do I want? And then in the next section, so what are the strategies that I'm using to seek those goals? And so we have really the plot, begins to unfold. And the next section could be, who taught me these? Where did I learn these strategies? How did I learn these strategies? Who taught me to seek my goals in this way? And that would be an excellent beginning. Then, if we were working with someone to take it further, we would say, well, who can help you to reach these goals? And who's interfering? Who or what is interfering with your reaching your goals? And then we have the raw material from which to construct other options for getting to where we want to go. And so that's one approach that I particularly like. Do you have another?
No, I think that's a good idea. There's tremendous. I once taught a class in journaling, and a lot of the people came to the class going, the problem with journaling is it just seems open-ended, and we don't do anything about it. So we would really, coming up with little stories of your day in the third person, writing down what you did, but putting yourself in the third person. So you say, once upon a time there was a woman, and she got up in the morning and noticed the sun was shining, and just doing it that way can often really start to give you an awareness that you didn't have before. And yeah, I think what Louis said, really picking a goal, like and again, writing in the third person about a goal is very powerful. I often ask the question at the end of the day, who owns your day? Who owned your day today? And who are all the people who try to own your day? And then how can you do one thing to take your day back? There's lots and lots of little ways to start to kind of nudge at the edges of the stories that you tell yourself and begin to discover where they might be shiftable. Where might you be locked into a story that you just haven't really thought about for a while, and so it's got a bit stuck. It's one that you didn't really take out and shake out and see where it came from, and so maybe there's something interesting in that, because we have this tremendous power to be creative in our lives that we often, reserve for just when we're playing with our kids, and I think using it in our everyday lives is vital. I think it's actually an important nutrient and an important medicine.
That is wonderful. And as we approach the end of our program, unfortunately, we couldn't stay here talking with you guys the whole day, even though it would be amazingly wonderful to hear what you have to tell us. I'd like to give you guys a few minutes for you to relay any final comments or messages you might have to our listeners.
Well, I think probably what we haven't emphasized is the importance of community. We've talked about it indirectly in terms of an audience, but I think it's important to say that we all need community, and we need to go actively looking for community. Some people find it through churches. Some people find it through sanghas, as in Buddhist meditation societies. Some people create it through their friends. But we all need that. And one of the approaches we've taken is to say to people who feel like none of the available communities appeal to them and they don't know enough people, is to say, okay, call up everybody you do know and invite them to come over at a specific time for the purpose of being healing for each other, and see who shows up. And even if it's 2 people, start from there and meet at a regular time at a regular interval and see what develops. And community can unfold. And we need that. We need people who care about us and support us. And we need to feel like we have people who care about us, and not just because we pay them to do so, but because they genuinely care about us and we care about them, and we support each other to move toward a more harmonious life, a more balanced life, a more happy life. So in Lakota language, it's called a hochoka. In Buddhism, it's called a sangha. So we all need that, and we can all create that.
I think that's an excellent point, and I think actually for me, I would say, when you learn the stories that you're living by, you begin to find areas of flexibility and transformation in your life you never imagined. So So let the journey begin. Let the storytelling begin.
Well, that's been wonderful speaking with the two of you. I would like to thank you from the bottom of our hearts. It was a pleasure, and I hope that you guys can be with us another time soon in the future.
Thank you. We'd love to.
Hi, dear listener. We are here on Kardec Radio, and you were speaking with Dr. Mehl Madrona and Barbara Mainguy about their book. We had a wonderful conversation with them about different techniques that we have, that we can use in our daily lives to help us heal. And as we go by our everyday, and in this January, we may think about using some of those so that we can achieve those New Year's resolutions.
Thank you for listening to Kardec Radio, broadcasting live every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Email us and share your comments at www.kardecradio.com. Until next time, we wish you many blessings.